afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are joining us from, and whenever you get the chance to listen to this very, very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on this chilly Saturday morning in Lagos. I don't know where you're joining from, but it's very chilly. Not very, quite chilly in Lagos State. But thank you so much for joining us. You are very welcome to an SDG5 focused webinar brought to you by SimpleFix Nigeria. So please, if you do not mind, kindly let us know where you are joining in from. I'm Precious Mobile, and it's such an honor and an absolute delight to be your host for this conversation. Our theme for this webinar is bridging the gender gap. And like I said earlier, as I said earlier, brought to you by SimpleFix Nigeria in collaboration with Face of Liberty International. Thank you so much. Please let us know where you are joining in from. And of course, what your expectations are for today's conversation. I'm stalling a bit with hopes that we have responses in the chat, but I can't see any yet. Your name, where you're joining in from, and what your expectations are for today's conversation. Thank you so much. But yes, I'll proceed. So as I mentioned, today's webinar is brought to you by SimpleFix Nigeria. And in case you're not aware, SimpleFix Nigeria recently published a policy brief on SDG 5 Sustainable Development Goal 5 policy implementation in Nigeria. And it made a very critical and daring argument that Nigeria does not have a gender policy problem. It rather has a gender governance problem. So this conversation is an addendum to that daring but factual statement. And of course, it's very significant now because we're in April and last month was Women's History Month all over the world. So we are joining the global conversation. SimpleFix Nigeria is joining the SimpleFix Nigeria is joining the global conversation on gender equality. And it poses a very important question, which is, can Nigeria meet up with SDG 5 by 2030? Can Nigeria meet up with SDG 5 by 2030? We are what? 2026. We have how many years from 2030? 4 years from 2030. And I think that, which is why I think that today's conversation is very, very critical and very relevant. And in case you're wondering why we're having today's conversation, why should we ask that question? Why is it important that Nigeria asks such questions? I mean, if you're in Nigeria, with the happenings of recent years, if you're in Nigeria, if you're Nigerian in Nigeria, I do not think that you should be surprised by this question. But just in case you are, and in case you're not aware, I'll share some statistics to juggle all our memories. Nigeria, which is, of course, Africa's most populous nation, ranks 124th out of 148 countries on the 2025 World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap Index, which places Nigeria at the bottom third globally. Nigeria scores particularly poorly on political empowerment and educational attainment. Nigeria's Gender Inequality Index is also among the worst in sub-Saharan Africa, reflecting high maternal mortality, low contraceptive prevalence, significant gender gaps in secondary education, and minimal representation in decision-making structures at every level of governance. Gender equality intersects with broader governance failures, and women, of course, remain underrepresented in political decision-making. Women face legal discriminations in inheritance, marriage, and they bear disproportionate burdens of poverty. There's a very, very popular statistic that states that we have 133 million multidimensionally poor Nigerians we have a statistic that states that we have over 133 million multidimensionally poor Nigerians. And of this overwhelming statistic, women, of course, they bear the disproportionate burden of poverty and violence. The last I would read for today, or for this morning, or for now, is a McKinsey Global Institute study of 95 countries found that advancing women's equality could add $12 trillion to global GDP by 2025, and we're in 2026. And in a scenario where women participate in labor markets equally to men, the gain rises to $28 trillion, which is a 26% increase in global output. For Sub-Saharan Africa, closing this gender gap would boost regional GDP by 10 to 12%. So here's what you can expect for today's conversation. Thorough insights into where Nigeria actually stands on SDG 5 targets. We have education, economic participation, political representation, legal protection, and violence prevention. You can also expect an analysis into why comprehensive policies haven't translated to measurable progress. If you remember in the beginning, I stated, or SimpleFix Nigeria stated in its policy brief, that Nigeria does not have a gender policy problem. It has a gender governance problem. So today, part of what you should expect is an analysis into why all these policies haven't translated to measurable progress. And of course, you'd expect a deep dive into what evidence-based reforms could actually move the needle by 2030. As far as gender equality in Nigeria is concerned, policies are not the problem because Nigeria has a handful of legislative and policy frameworks that address gender inequality. So I'd just like to do a little experiment just to feel the pulse in the room. With a quick show of hands, of course, your virtual hands. How many of us are aware of the Gender and Equal Rights Opportunity Bill? Anyone? Any hands? Oh, okay, great. So we have one hand, or I can see just one hand. How many of us are aware of this? Is, I think, the most popular, so I think we should all be aware of it. The Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, properly called the VAPP Act. Great. How many of us are aware of the Child Rights Act? Show of hands. Okay. How many of us are aware of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Violence Against Women, which has been ratified in Nigeria or by Nigeria? What about the National Gender Policy? The last I'll state for today, but I think is very shocking. How many of us are aware that Nigeria actually adopted a gender responsive budgeting principle since 2006? Okay, right. That proves a point, but I'm not going to state that point now. I think as we proceed in today's conversation, we will buttress that. But if there's anything that I think this has established is that, again, we do not have a gender policy problem in Nigeria. It's rather that of governance, is that of implementation, and that of operationalization. For today's conversation, I would not be having this conversation alone. I am joined by three phenomenal women, and I'll just quickly read their bios, so please stay with me. Our first speaker for today, speaker and panelist, is Mary Jane Unanka. Our second speaker and panelist is Chidera Precious Anyawu, while our third speaker and panelist is Arek Bitan Ikenode. So I'll be reading their bios. Mary Jane is a lawyer, an associate member of the Women in Business Management and Public Service, and a passionate social entrepreneur widely known as the catalyst for social change. She is the founder of the Mary Jane Sustainable Development Initiative, which empowers vulnerable children through sustainable interventions in education, health, emotional support, and skills development. Her impactful work has earned her notable recognitions, including the 2024 Mandela Washington Alumni Association of Nigeria Her Excellence Award under the Community Catalyst category, the Africa Emerging Leader Award in Ghana, and nominations for the Under 30 CEOs Award, as well as the Imperial Leo Network Award. She's a graduate of the School of Politics, Policy, and Governance, and she continues to champion transformative change across communities. I'll quickly jump to Chidera Precious Anyawu's bio. Chidera Precious Anyanwu is an advocacy leader working at the intersection of child rights, youth-led advocacy, and public health. With over 6 years of experience, she leads in initiatives focused on child protection, youth empowerment, policy reform, and harm reduction in Nigeria and across Africa. Chidera is the founder of the Child Advocacy for Development and Safety Initiative, CATI, where she drives community-based programs and national advocacy campaigns, including Your Voice is Strength, which has reached thousands of children and caregivers. Chidera has led policy dialogues, community consultations, and coalition building efforts with a strong focus on empowering young people as advocates for change. She's also the author of Becoming a Safe Adult and is currently working on a children's book on safety, on body safety and consent. And quickly to the third panelist and speaker for today's conversation, Arekpitan. Arekpitan Ikenode is a writer, storyteller, and development communication specialist with a passion for shaping narratives that drive awareness and inspire systemic change. She holds a master's degree in development management from the University of Turin, and she currently works at the International Training Center of the ILO. Her work spans a range of social impact areas, including ecological justice, youth engagement, narrative change, gender equality, and movement building. With a focus on strategic communications, literature, and advocacy, Arekpitan explores how storytelling can deepen understanding of polycrisis and, more importantly, how people respond to it. With a very resounding round of applause, please welcome our three speakers to today's conversation. Very well, warm welcome, Mary Jane. Lovely, lovely, lovely to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome, Chidera Precious Anyanwu. Welcome, Arekpitan. So very quickly, so please, with a show of your face, can you kindly share what you look forward to in today's event? Hi, Mary Jane. Can you hear me? Okay, so I'll quickly move to Chidera Precious. Hi, Chidera Precious. Thank you so much for joining us. Lovely to have you join us. Do you mind telling us what you look forward to in today's conversation?
Thank you, Precious. Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm particularly excited to be part of this conversation. So for me, I think my interest is in what do we do? How can we move forward? Like you've reiterated over and over, Nigeria does not have a policy problem. It has a policy governance and implementation problem. So my expectation from this webinar is to discuss at grassroots level, at community level, at individual level, how do we galvanize for implementation? What can we do at our own space to ensure that we are bringing what is in policy to reality? That's it.
Thank you so much. Very well said, and I agree totally with you. Hi, Arepitan. Lovely to have you. Please, can you tell us what you look forward to having us achieve as a collective in today's conversation?
I think it's I look forward to a conversation that challenges us where we are challenged, both the speakers and the listeners, where we are deeply challenged to do better, basically. So I look forward to being challenged by the questions and by the exchanges and by the ideas that we will exchange today.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you for being apt as well. I definitely agree with you. I would have gone back to Mary Jane, but because of our time, I'd like us to proceed. So here's a quick run of show. We'll have Chidera go first, and she will take us on why children are the front line of gender inequality. As we know, SDG 4, SDG 5 rather as a goal, has 6 underlying pillars: end discrimination, eliminate violence, end harmful practices, recognize unpaid care work, ensure participation and leadership, and access to reproductive rights. So Chidera will be taking us on eliminating violence. So specifically why children are the front line of gender inequality. Arepitan will be taking us on the architecture of failure, why Nigeria's gender lens don't produce gender equality. While Mary Jane will be wrapping up with from policy to power, what grassroots advocacy can and can't do, and then we would quickly move to our panel conversation. Without further ado, please join me to welcome Chidera Precious as she takes us for 12 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes, on why children are at the front line of gender inequality. Chidera, we are ready when you are. Thank you so much. Spotlight's on you now.
Thank you very much, Precious. Thank you, everyone on call. I mean, my session is supposed to be humanized, so let's do this. Let's do this. I did share a slide with Chike. I don't know if you guys can put it up. Great. Okay. Why are children the front line of gender inequality? I'm going to start with two opening statements, basically. The first thing is that gender does not start with an age bracket. You don't get to a particular age and then all of a sudden you begin to identify as female or male. Gender is a social norm that we're born with, and it's a social norm that is so engraved into our system and society. It starts as early as birth. How people react to a child being born is largely determined on what gender or what sex the child falls into. And from that onset, you can begin to see where gender inequalities starts playing. So that's the first thing I would like to say. And the second thing I would like to say is that when you think about gender inequality or gender equality, it sounds really abstract. But if we really want to understand the costs and the impact and how it affects us, we need to start identifying the outcomes. How does it manifest? And what's the impact of those manifestations, or what's the scale of those manifestations as it relates to Nigeria? Chike, I can't see my slide, but I'm just waiting. I can see it now, but it's not in presentation mode. If you can please do that. Okay, so we need to examine how does gender inequality and gender equality, vice versa, how does it play out? What are the indicators? What are the manifestations, and at what scale do they manifest? That's the way we can begin to determine the costs it has on the society generally, and then what it has on children specifically. So let's just go to the next slide. So gender equality generally manifests in different ways. We have child marriages, which is something that affects the girl child disproportionately. We have violence against women. It's so common and normalized that in African societies and all over the world, actually, we have justifications for why women and children should be subjected to violence, including discipline, including patriarchy in the home, right? We also have gender inequality manifesting as lack of education access for the girl child. We have it manifesting as unequal pay. We have it manifesting as lack of access to economic empowerment. And we can also see it even in our political system, our leadership system, where women occupy very, very below 10% of the general seat. I don't know what's going on with my slide, and it's a little bit distracting. Either it's on or it's not on. I don't like it on, and I can't use it. So if it's not working, we could just take it out completely, then I can. Yeah. So we have, like I've mentioned already, unequal access to education, toxic patriarchal norms. We have workplace exclusion of, women, and this starts as early as childhood. So that brings me to, what are the skills? What is the skill in Nigeria? At what level do we experience it? And I'm going to focus on children. We have child marriages exceeding 50% in some part of the Northeast. In the recent policy brief that was released by CADSI, Child Advocacy for Development and Safety Initiative, we saw that the implementation gap of the child protection law is still at 31% all over the world, all over Nigeria. And we have it at over 50% in certain regions, particularly the Northeast regions, where child marriages is high, access to education, it's grossly limited. Access to education is grossly limited. We have children getting married before 18 at 63.5%, at 50% in the Northeast, and then at 9.2% in the Southeast. And you see that despite the fact that we have these frameworks, these laws, the VAPP Act, the Child Rights Act, that has in paper addressed these issues, despite that, we still have budgeting as low as 119 naira per child in states like Lagos, and lower than that in states like Kano, in the regions where we had resistance to the Child Rights Act and late adoptions. So these are like how they basically manifest. We have gender-based violence, still a thing that is happening within our culture, within our traditions, practices that are normalized, practices that are practically accepted, even by the receivers of violence in themselves. That is to tell you that there is a huge gap between what has been accepted as a nation and the norms in individual communities. Basically saying the laws and the policies have not translated into individual understanding, it has not translated into individual attitude, into behaviors, and generally into norms that society adhere to. And that is because of the bridge, the gap. Apart from people like us who are particularly in this meeting, a whole lot of people do not even know these laws to exist. So this is basically where the contradiction comes in. We have the Child Rights Act, it prohibits marriage before 18, guarantees education and health. But what is the reality? We still have about 50% gap in implementation in certain areas. We have the VAPP Act that criminalizes domestic violence and harmful traditional practices. But the recent what's the name of that community that blew up the internet is a practical indication that these things just exist in paper and it has not been translated into community understanding. It has not been translated to the point where it's now normalized. It's something that we all agree to, even in the space. You have the national gender policy, the framework is across all sectors of gender equality, yet implementation remains very largely limited. Next slide, please. Continuing on why children are at the front line. Remember from my opening statement, I did mention that gender inequality does not automatically start when you enter adolescence or when you become a woman. It starts as early as childhood. It even reflects in how they celebrate a male child and a female child. Oh, what child did she give birth to? And there's a female, God will give them male. Like, do you get, why are we praying for God to give them male in the future? We are not even celebrating the one that has been given right now. And you see it manifesting in how the children are treated. Is entrenched long before adulthood. Girls are systematically denied of the right to through marriages, school dropouts, normalized abuse. 1 in 5 girls experience domestic violence, even at that sexual violence at that young age before they turn 18. Next slide, please. We see it reflecting in education loss, high risk of health issues, and the outcomes determine how children basically survive in adulthood. It is entrenched. It doesn't stop when they become children. There's a practical, a scientific link to children experiencing either witnessing intimate partner violence or experiencing violence as a result of intimate partner violence in the home, and them also perpetuating or being a receptor of it. So if we want to stop violence, we need to put children at the front line. We need to first understand that violence amongst children needs to stop because it's intergenerational. It keeps growing. Patriarchy is a system that is embedded from childhood, and for it to be corrected in generations to come, it needs to be corrected from childhood. So The leadership inclusion has to be intentional. Protection from violence has to be intentional. Integration into society has to be intentional. So next slide, please. Basically, the urgent priorities right now is to implement the Child Rights Act in all 36 states. It has been adopted historically in all 36 states of Nigeria, despite the resistance. However, there is no funding, especially in underserved areas where there was resistance to adopting these laws in the first place. We need to expand access to quality education for girls, train personnel to enforce child rights laws within these communities. That is one step to fixing gender equality in Nigeria. And as to whether we are able to achieve it in 2030, we have the laws. If we are able to implement, 4 years is, to my own opinion, 4 years is good enough for us to lay good foundations to achieving gender equality in Nigeria. So I'm looking forward to the questions and the conversations that we're going to be having after now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chidera. Thank you so much. And very well said. I totally agree with you when you say that gender equality or inequality doesn't wait till adulthood. It starts as early as childhood. Very quickly, we'll be moving to our next speaker, Arepitani Kenode, and she'll be taking us on the architecture of failure, why Nigeria's gender laws do not produce gender equality. Thank you. Arepitani, we are ready when you are.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Precious. Please, if you can't hear me, just let me know because my Wi-Fi signal is not that strong. Yeah, so I would be talking about the policy architecture that we have in Nigeria, and I think it's very important to think about first, in general, how policies fail, or why policies fail, or what makes a policy fail. And I think it's very important to start this conversation by having this conversation not just in isolation and thinking just about gender, but also thinking about the other SDGs that we have in Nigeria. I don't think there's any SDG we are going to be able to meet by 2030. So what's happening in the gender equality space or in the gender equality sector is not different. It's not special. It's not unique. It basically just reflects the general ineptitude of governance in the Nigerian state. So I feel that that is a very important starting point for us. And we should not isolate this discussion from a general failure of governance that is predominant in Nigeria. When we have a public policy, we have it to identify issues. So the policy basically identifies issues, formulates solutions, implements certain programs, and evaluate the result. That's basically what a policy does. The policy is basically what the government chooses to do or not do about a problem. So in Nigeria, we have a national gender policy that mostly hasn't done anything for gender equality in Nigeria. And I think that it's important to first state that this policy, you know, is was a bit, is very idealistic. The policy is idealistic, and the policy is not thinking about instruments that work within the system that it's supposed to function in. I think that the policy did not take into account certain constraints present in the Nigerian state, that the policy did not, adjust the expectation of what can realistically be achieved in a state like Nigeria, and that the policy made so many assumptions that people are just going to do what is right because you tell them to do what is right, by, presupposing more knowledge and control than what is feasibly and realistically possible. Uh, and just, looking at the policy and looking at the brief that SimpleFix created, which I think is such an ambitious brief and very thorough and very well put together. And I encourage everyone to read it. We see already itemized the several problems of the Nigerian state. We see the lack of institutional architecture. We see the absence of political will. We see the presence of, duplicitous legal systems in Nigeria, the pluralism we have from the customary laws, we have the federal laws, states doing their own thing. We have religious norms and customs and religious laws, and all these things, conflicting with one another. We see that the Nigerian state doesn't have a very strong enforcement mechanism or a strong enforcement architecture, not just for gender equality, but for other laws that have failed to protect the Nigerian people. We see that we don't even have, most importantly, data. We don't have data that we can count on. We have a policy that needs data that we don't produce. We have a policy that wants to measure data that we don't produce. We have an M&E framework for indicators that we don't even track, indicators that we're not measuring. We have a policy that cannot demonstrate or enforce, the cost of non-compliance. You can't just tell people to do XYZ and we just assume that, oh, they're going to do it in good faith. We have a policy that doesn't place political pressure on anybody, any system, any government, both local, state, and federal, to invest in the needed statistical infrastructure to deliver what the policy is supposed to do. We also have a policy that is not even backed with any kind of fiscal integration, a policy without a fiscal spine. The ministry is not funded. The ministry doesn't have the resources. The ministry doesn't have the technical capacity. The ministry doesn't have the needed resources to do what it's meant to do. So it's just, we have this good thought, we have these ideas, and then you create a policy and then you launch it, and just, it feels almost like wishful thinking. And I think that is the main reason why the policy has not been able to achieve anything in Nigeria since 2006. Okay, so you are trying to operate an evidence-based policy framework in an environment where things that are evidence-based don't even work. You're trying to do something democratic in an environment where democracy is failing. You're trying to do something in an environment where non-compliance is the norm. So it is very interesting to think that it's going to work. So what we basically need in Nigeria is to have the required architecture to ensure that when we make policies like this ones, it's able to work. And if you look through the brief, we see examples in Namibia, we see examples in South Africa and Rwanda of countries who have done the necessary work to create the necessary architecture, to create the necessary constitutional backing, to give the ministry the authority that it needs, the power to enforce, the power to question, to litigate, to investigate, and all of that. So we can't just have a policy just, floating in the air somewhere. We need to have a policy that is coordinated by a ministry with the power and the capacity to coordinate that policy. It needs to have structural legitimate protection, structural legislative protection. It needs to have the power to be enforced even at the grassroots level. It needs to, work in a space where people are used to things working and people feel the political pressure to make it work because, people decide to start to make certain demands and they ensure that these things work. So right now, I think it's just important to think about how we might begin now to create that infrastructure, to create that system, to create a society where very important, well put together documents like this one are able to function. And I think that is the main thing that is left. And if we look through the brief, we see that several suggestions have been made, several suggestions to institutionalize this kind of commitment over time, where we see that gradually we start to make certain gains. The gains will not appear overnight, but if we start to build the foundation, independent of whoever is in power, independent of, whoever is going to be the Minister of Women Affairs, whoever is going to be the NHRC head, we can begin to create a system, begin to create an environment where things actually work because we've done the hard work of setting that foundation, of creating a strong judicial culture, of making legal aid accessible, of strengthening the state's ability to deliver this gender machinery with resources, with authority, with the technical capacity that it needs. We've been able to create a system where we've harmonized, these customary laws, the religious laws, the statutory laws with the federal provisions and, look at what states are doing and all of that. So I think right now for Nigeria, what is most important is to first create the architecture where people can get things done. I always tell persons that what makes Nigeria very interested is not the prevalence of crime or whatever. It's that persons feel that they can do whatever they like without, anybody calling them to account, without, they say, I'm going to do this to you and nothing is going to happen. The confidence in the nothing happening is the problem. So I will just stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fitan. Thank you so much. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. We indeed need an architecture. I think that would lay the foundation for not just gender equality as an SDG, but every other single, I mean, and all the policies that touch on gender equality, but every, you know, single reality that we want to see in Nigeria. Very quickly, I'd like us to move to Mary Jane. And by the way, please, if you have questions, if you have thoughts, if you have reflections, please do not hesitate to state in the chat, to drop in the chat. We have, I think, 10 to 15 minutes dedicated to Q&As, and would really, really, really love to hear your reflections. Hi, Mary Jane. Lovely to have you. I can see your video is turned on. Thank you so much for being proactive. We'll hand the reins over to you. From policy to power, what grassroots advocacy can and can't do. I love that it says can and can't do. I have thoughts on this, but I'll let you have the floor. Yeah, so thank you and welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, so Chile identified that there's a huge gap between the laws and the implementation. Why sorry if I murdered your name, identified the faith policies, challenges, human costs, like she gave us the issue. So basically, mine is to talk about from policy to power. There are a lot of policies. Even we as lawyers, we are tired. Every time they keep bringing up new laws, new regulation, new guidelines. But the problem is that the implementation is where we have an issue. So what do citizen and civil society actually do with this analysis? So when we talk about grassroots advocacy, like what we are doing now, or grassroots initiative, our goal is to move from conversation to action, which basically that's what all initiatives that talk about the SDG 5 has been doing for years. We keep talking, we keep.
Hi, Mary Jane. We lost audio and video. I don't know if it's just me, but we can't hear you.
Yeah, I think he was thrown out.
Oh, shoot. So what do we do? So we have a panel session very quickly. I'd like to know whether to jump right into the panel, depending on when Mary Jane gets back. I mean, she's part of the panel, so it's been great to have her back. But Chike, what do you think? Oh, she's back. Hi, Mary Jane. We lost you for a few
Yeah, it's
secs.
network. Sorry about that.
Okay.
But can you hear me clearly now?
Yes, we can hear you clearly. And if network is terrible, I think you can turn off your video. I don't know. Chike, what do you think? I think you can turn off your video
Yeah, that's fine.
yeah, if you keep getting frequent interruptions, please. Yeah. Would rather
Okay, let
hear
me
you
just do
than
that so that
have you out.
I'll have like a better network. But
All
can
right,
you hear me
thank you.
clearly now?
Yes, can hear you clearly.
Okay, sorry about this. So like
Hi, Mary Jane, we can hear you. It's there's a glitch or a lag.
oh my God, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about the network. I'm in the east. The network is so bad. So just to continue what I was saying. So I said, when we talk about grassroots advocacy, we are moving from, the goal is to move from the conversation to action, like the implementation strategy. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Just
Okay,
go ahead.
thank you. So citizen and civil society are the bridge between the policies and the real life impact. So the question is, so what do they actually do with all this analysis, everything we have been saying, the policies and everything? So what can they do? First of all, they translate the complex policies. There are a lot of policies that tackle the gender equality, especially for girl child. There's a whole lot. So what this grassroots advocacy do is they translate those complex policies, those complex guidelines, complex laws, complex regulation into everyday realities. Because these policies can feel so distant for and technical. I'll be very honest with you. Even as a lawyer, we have some policies that we try to break down into layman languages that we that but these people that the policies really affect directly don't really understand what the policies are meant for. So these policies can feel so distant and technical, but grassroots advocacy or initiative break them down into simple terms so that people can understand. What did I mean? For example, instead of talking about gender responsive budgeting or this thing, just tell people that these funds is being allocated for girls' child education, healthcare, maternity, this and that, support women, entrepreneurship. Once people understand how policy affect their life, they are more likely to demand for change. So breaking down this policy into simple terms for them to understand is one of the things that we can do. Also, grassroots advocacy turn community experience into evidence. What did I mean? Community already know where the problems are, what the problem is. For instance, girls dropping out of school, lack of access to healthcare, workplace, discrimination. And as a lady, you can't get to a certain level in your workplace, you can't be an MD, you can't be, there are a whole lot of problems. Communities know these problems already. So civil societies, advocacy group, initiative, they collect these life experiences and present them in a way policymakers cannot ignore. Because now we have an issue. I am a lady, I can't do this. There's a lot of discrimination, a lot of problem. The community knows this problem, so it's not silent, it's so glaring. So it's for us now to take that local issue to become a national conversation. That's what we are doing now. Know the problem, providing solution. This is what grassroots advocacy can also do. Also, as citizens, as civil society, we can also create, there's like pressure, more like constructive pressure in the society. So what they do is they attend town hall meetings, they engage local.
Hi, Mary Jane. We lost you if you're still speaking. I can't hear you. I don't know if it's just me, but we do not have audio from your end. Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so it's not my audio. Hi, Mary Jane. If you're speaking, we can't hear you. Okay, I think to make the best use of our time, we should dive directly into the panel conversation with all our three speakers. And I think that Mary Jane can use her responses to complement what she has started or the point she had begun to make when she was speaking about civil society organizations and the dynamics surrounding them. But before we do that, I'd just like to read a tiny snippet from the policy brief, which, like Arepitan says, is very thorough, and I think everyone on this call and everyone listening should, get a hold of it and really just deep dive into it. Achieving gender equality in Nigeria is not merely a policy goal or legal obligation. It is essential to securing national cohesion, broad-based prosperity, and resilient democratic governance. Whilst progress has been made, the promise of gender equality continues to fall short. Inconsistent implementation of key laws, inadequate funding, weak institutional mechanisms, which Arek Pitan thoroughly emphasized, and wide regional variations shaped by cultural resistance, which Precious Chidera emphasize as well, are also conspiring currently to ensure that formal commitments remain distant from lived realities. And like Arepitan says, not just for gender equality as an SDG, but for every other SDG. So to our panel conversations, and I'd like for our host to kindly spotlight all three speakers. I'll be asking questions and I'd really just appreciate very quick responses from all our speakers. And our very first question is, if you had to identify the single biggest barrier to achieving gender equality in Nigeria by 2030, what would it be? If you had to identify the single biggest barrier, I know that we have touched on it, Reputan has touched on it, Chidera has touched on it, and I think Baby Jane made that point as well. But as succinctly as possible, the biggest barrier to achieving gender equality in Nigeria by 2030, what would it be? Chidera, please go first if you do not mind.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Okay, so straight to the point. I think unlike other social issues, gender inequality and gender equality is inherently a norm problem. It's inherently a normative issue. It's something that is within the people. This is something that even if policies exist, there's resistance from the people because it's what they believe is an attitude that is collective. So what I think is the biggest barrier is translating these policies into a normative shift, into a norm shift, so that people within is beginning to translate into individual understanding and individual shift. I mean, the mechanisms to do this is also lacking. However, the biggest barrier is how to translate those policies. And it's being done in other countries, and I think it's something that is doable. Translating it into individual, community, and collective norm shifts. That is what I feel is the biggest barrier beyond the implementation gap, because you can't implement where there's resistance. First, people need to want to accept implementation and buy into it. So yeah, that's my biggest.
Thank you very much. I totally agree. You can't implement where there is resistance. So, Arakpitan, what do you think? What would you say is the single biggest barrier to achieving gender equality in Nigeria by 2030? Even though you've emphasized that it's impossible.
It's interesting because I feel like I'm supposed to say something different, but I agree so much with Precious. But I did not phrase it as a normative shift because I think that that's the way she put it is very, very real. I think that it's that we do not have a social political culture that treats gender equality as non-negotiable, which is just basically what Precious has said. This is not something important to us. You ask the average Nigerian woman, what's your main problem now? She's not going to tell you that it's gender equality because on some level, she does not even understand that the problems that she has is because she's being treated as an unequal part of society. That if she was given more opportunities, if she was integrated into society the way that she should, if she was given more chances, if she was treated as an equal, she would not have those problems. You understand? So you go and ask the average person, what's the biggest problem that you face? They're not going to say, oh, I think I think the fact that women are like 50% of Nigeria and they're held back, they're not represented, they have no voice, they are treated, they remain at the fringes, it's not going to come to mind. So we do not have a social culture, a culture. We don't have a religious culture. We don't have an ethnicity culture. We don't have nothing that treats gender equality as something that is important. In the church, in the mosque, in schools, in universities, in hospitals, it's something that we don't really recognize. It's just, once in a while, I always tell persons that if you sit down and you pay attention to your experiences as a woman, you will be radicalized. The reason why you have not been radicalized is because you've not paid attention. When you start to really sit down and think about things very carefully, you realize that the culture that we inhabit, the culture that we have, that we transfer, that we give to our children, is a culture that treats gender equality as an add-on, as an act of benevolence, as an act of generosity, as something that, okay, let's just do it. It feels more like virtue signaling. You add it to the form, you add it to the policy, you create a gender desk, you add it to your, just to look cool. Even that is within educated spaces, of course. So I agree with the pressures that it's really a cultural problem. People cannot demand for something that they don't want, something they don't understand, something that they feel threatened by. So the people need to want it enough for them to say, okay, you know what, let's hold our government accountable to deliver XYZ. Yeah.
Thank you so much. People need to want it enough. People need to want gender equality enough. Mary Jane is available to just throw in her
Yes, I
weight.
am.
Mary Jane, can you speak? Oh, great.
Yeah,
Very quickly, did you
I
get a question?
can. I
The
can.
single
I
biggest
think
barrier.
yes, I think Chidera and Arifat have just said what I have in mind, but I will just add to it that significantly, apart from identifying the gap and the social norms that they are mentioned, I think lack of sufficient investment and political will also is also like a barrier because if fundings or if enough investment is not geared towards achieving these policies and everything, I don't think it will be implemented. The implementation will be very strong because what I was able to identify while reading up for this is that we should understand that there's a gap between the policy and the implementation, a very big gap, very big one that I don't know who is going to close that gap, but there's a very big gap because we have these policies, we have this framework written on paper, but they are not being implemented. In some institution or in some cases, this lack of funding, um, training, coordinations, that I think that the government should invest more. There should be more of like sufficient investment in and political will. We should have government backing to make this to achieve gender equality by 2030. My own issue is that there's lack of sufficient investment in that aspect and political. They just leave it like we'll keep talking. If we keep talking from now to 2020, 2030, nothing will be achieved. But by the time we identify these barriers and we're able to tackle it, I think there will be a headway. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mary Jane. Thank you so much. Thank you to all our speakers. And again, if you have questions, reflections, please do not hesitate to drop in the chat. I am really looking forward to having your reflection and even feedback for our speakers and questions as well, if you have any. Very quickly to our next question. So our next question. Most people watching or listening are not policymakers or full-time advocates, right? What can everyday citizens, students, workers, parents actually do to push for gender equality? So miss us with raise awareness. Yeah, we would not appreciate, after like theirs as well. We really like specific actionable suggestions or feedbacks or call to actions that everyone who is not a policy literate can do to move the needle forward in favor of gender equality. Anyone who wants to go first, we'll have you. Please unmute and just speak.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think since we unanimously agree that we have a culture problem, we need to create a new culture. And that's something I feel everybody can be a part of in whatever capacity. If you're a school principal, you can create a new culture in your school. If you're an employer, if you're a manager, if you're a supervisor, you can create a new culture where you work. If you're a storyteller, most importantly, you can create a new culture. We see that in the early 2000s, we had this TV show in Nigeria titled Waiting Day. I don't know if anybody remembers that TV show, and it was just like it's something that was showing on TV every week. It was a nice TV show. It was engaging and everything, but most importantly, that TV show was about normalizing HIV/AIDS. It was about destigmatizing having HIV/AIDS, about seeing HIV/AIDS, persons with HIV as human beings, as normal people, as you and I, and stuff like that. I think I did a lot of work on the mindset shift towards how we view persons living with HIV and AIDS. So I think that we can do that with the stories that we tell. We can do that with the way we preach in church, with the kind of sermons we give at the altars. We can do that in the kind of stories that we write, the kind of films we make, the kind of music that we make. I listen to Afrobeat a lot, and I see that a lot of the lyrics are usually about reinforcing the subordination of women, the inferiority of women, the sexualization of women. So in this kind of things, when you're surrounded by this kind of narratives, these things reverberates it echoes and people start to absorb these things unconsciously. So what we can do is that we have to see that even as Nigerians, that our political imaginations are stifled, our visions of change have been repressed just by being the society that we've been in. We say it go better, we go better, and it never gets better. So over time, we begin to accept that this is normal. We need to create a culture where people begin to hope again, where people begin to aspire, where people begin to feel that things can be fixed, that it's possible for a woman to go and run for local government chairman, for a woman to become governor and president and all of those things. So I think that this is very important, that we need to help Nigerians look beyond these visions of supremacy and visions of scarcity, and begin to imagine that a better way is possible. And mostly this is what the art does. This is what we do with literature. This is what we do with storytelling. This is what we do with the kind of narratives that we have in the world, in the society. So I think all of us in this room, in some capacity or the other, can engage in normative shifts, like Precious said.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
Okay.
much. We need to mainstream these conversations about gender equality. I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more. Chidera, do you want to chime in?
Yes, please. Okay, so I'll basically put it in two words, visibility and diffusion. And this goes both ways. I think as individuals, we should make it a personal vendetta to make visible either good characters or good attitudes towards gender equality, or bad attitudes towards gender equality, and diffusing what we think about it. Basically saying, when we hear music, when we see stories, when we see actions by companies, big corporations, celebrities that do not align, we make it visible. We say this does not align with actually what works in terms of achieving gender equality. We bring out the dirt inside and make it visible, and then diffuse it. So that's something that happened radically last 2 weeks, if you notice, with the festival where women were harassed and raped. One thing that happened was visibility, and you could see the backlash, and all of a sudden they started acting. We are used to ignoring bad news, and I think one way to fix what we can do as citizens is to ensure we spotlight good news, celebrate people who are at the forefront of gender equality. We have a way of making people, when women come out, say, hey, pick me, that doesn't help. We should just, spotlight people who are doing the most, and also spotlight people who are doing the worst, and diffuse what we think about it. So that's just my recommendation.
Visibility and diffusion, indeed. Mary Jane, do you want to chime in?
Yes, I want to add to what Chidera said. It's just that she said visibility. As citizens, you and me, we can help by encouraging victims to report and also help them seek help. Can you hear me? Is the network okay?
We can hear you.
Yeah, we can support. Yeah, we can support by reporting. Like she said, spotlighting all this to make you involved. We can also, there are also practical ways we as citizens can get involved. We can hold our local leader accountable, because all this thing happen at the local government level, at local level first, before even moving. So we can hold our local leaders accountable, attend town hall meetings, community development initiate meetings, concern engagements, ask important questions. For example, what is being done to keep girls in school? Is there any support for women-led businesses? Are there safe reporting mechanisms? We can also do this, like engage our local leaders accountable, hold them accountable. I think, again, we can also promote girls' education in practical ways. You and I, like normal citizens, may involve organizing local scholarship to contribution, donating school materials, just make them feel among, because these are what we can easily do without government intervention. These are what you and I can do without government intervention, without waiting for policies implementation. So this was what every day as a citizen, this is the thing we can do.
Right,
Even
thank you
as
so much.
not,
Apologies, I thought you were done speaking. Please wrap up.
network.
Sorry. Yeah,
Can you hear me? Do you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. So I think that's it. That's just for me.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Accountability, even from the grassroots level, very important. I totally agree with you. Our very final question for this panel. is somewhat reflective, and we are curious to know what gives you hope. We have thoroughly emphasized the brokenness of our institutions, and I mean, last month was, Women History Month. There was a myriad of conversations across board. Everywhere you turn, there's a webinar somewhere, there's a conversation somewhere, there's a workshop, a conference somewhere. So there has been a lot of conversations on what is failing. Yes, CEDAW has spoken to visibility, holding people accountable, holding leaders, holding celebrities accountable, and holding them accountable when they do what's right, applauding them and calling them out. That's accountability, right? But I think if there's anything that has stayed with me through this conversation is the enormity of work that is at hand. And because the damage is systemic, it seems somewhat impossible. I'm tempted to use I'm trying so hard not to use the word um I'm hopeless, right? Because the challenge just seems like it is larger than life. Yet, you three are here. You are doing the work that you're doing in private practice, as in the NGO space, as civil society, as members of the civil society. You keep showing up, and your presence here really speaks to the fact that you are hopeful, speaks to the fact that you are willing to make your voice count. So what makes you believe that change is possible? What progress have you seen? Are there small wins that suggest that there's hope? Are there small wins that suggest that gender equality in a country like Nigeria, with all that we have said, maybe not 2030, because I mean 2030 seems like it really doesn't seem practicable, right? Is there hope that it is possible at all? What gives you hope? What progress have you seen? Please share with us again.
Okay, can I go first?
Yes, please,
The
please
network is
take it up.
a bit stable. So I think for me personally, I'll talk from my personal experience and like personally, what gives me hope is that the change is happening, even if it is a gradual process. We have to know that the change is already happening, even if it's a gradual process. We are seeing open conversation about gender equality in community. People keep talking about it. So what gives me hope is that there's already change already happening, but it's in a slow pace, like it's in a gradual process. Also, issues like girls' education, workplace discrimination, and gender-based violence are now discussed openly. I'm happy to see those conversations go on. I'm happy to see that people are talking about this. So whether we are seeing the change now or we are seeing it in the next 10 years, the issue or the good thing is that these conversations are happening. People are having this conversation. That shift in that conversation is important because it changes people's attitude. Anything we are learning from here, I've gotten some hints from Chidera, I got some hints from Arekweton. So I can also add it to what I have. So the conversation, so I'm happy to see that there's hope that people are actually having this, they are not silent about it. So there's open conversation. We're also seeing more women stepping into leadership roles in community association. So all these things give me hope. I've been in an executive that I was the only female out of 10 executives. I had 9 male. I was the only female. So things like this gives me hope that there's a chance to fly. Even though we know that there's gender inequalities, but seeing women step into leadership position or roles in churches, in community association, public service, like gives me so much joy and know that yes, we are moving, even though it's slow. Also, I think students and young professionals, especially ladies, like 3 of us on this group, the work we're doing, I think also it's a sign, it's an encouraging sign for people. We talk to young people, we have this, we allow them, we give a practical example on how we're able to navigate the discrimination at workplaces or even taking up leadership position. Also, seeing civil society organization work closely with communities also make me understand that there's hope, even though we have not gotten there yet. So this partnership, I think they are producing some practical solution, even though it might not be the instant solution that we need, but this partnership with the civil societies and communities that have been affected shows that there's hope, and it gives me so much joy to see that this partnership exists and there are some little solution being provided to the issue already identified. So, but while these challenges remain, the momentum is growing. There's a little because I remember that even though we have this conversation last year, there's some change from last year till now. So there's a gradual process, or there's a gradual change in it, and it gives me so much joy. And when small wins continue to build on each other, like I've learned from Chide, I've learned from Arikweton, like we create a lasting change. We have already identified that there's this problem. We have solutions. If we're able to implement those solutions, I think there'll be shift. By the time we have this conversation by next year, trust me, there are some problems we have identified this year that we might not identify by next year, that there might be a solution to it. So all these things give me hope, and it will never let me give up, because I am proud to be a woman, and it's something that entices me. And if I come to the world again, I want to be a woman. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary Jane. Very well said. Arikweton, do you want to go next? If there's anything, no pressure.
Yeah, I think what gives me hope is that I've seen that it can be done. I've seen that it can be done. Nigeria is not that bad. It's not like we're the worst country on earth. We've seen countries, who have been. I think in Rwanda before, women could not even express opinions publicly, and now we are studying them, and we are looking at Rwanda and saying, what can we learn from Rwanda? We know how the apartheid South Africa used to be. It was worse. But now we can see, oh, what lessons can we learn from South Africa? And even just looking at the history of the women's movement, how before women just wearing trousers was such a big problem, and people said it would destroy the family structure. And now we find that even very laughable. We know that women were not even allowed to practice law some years ago in certain countries. Women could not be doctors, women could not be certain things. So I've seen that we've made progress. So, and I think that gives me hope. And to see that we are gathered here today on a cold Saturday morning, we all logged in and we are like, okay, let's have this conversation. There are young people like us in Nigeria, young people like us who are doing the work. I think that's all one needs to see and say, okay, you know what, there's hope. There's hope. Like people fought for women in Ozoro that they did not know. Men and women said, you know what, this is wrong. This is not it. So much that the arrests were made. The thing was shut down. And so there is hope. It's not going the way we would want it to go, but there is hope. And things are improving. So that gives me hope.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I agree. Very well said. Chidera?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I would have to align with both speakers, but I'm going to say what gives me hope is that there is both individual resistance and collective resistance. I mean, we have women themselves who are at the receiving end also stepping up. It's no longer something that it's being given to a government to fix or society. Women are taking matters into their hands. They're empowering themselves. They're educating themselves so that they can create the change they want. We have women-owned organizations now. We have women's own spaces, and that gives me hope. Another thing that gives me hope is globalization and technology. The fact that globalization has brought everything close to home. We can see what is possible. Norms are difficult to change when there is no exposure, but now there is exposure. Like Arabitan has mentioned, we can see what's happening in other countries and how women have evolved to, be better, and how society basically has, made necessary I don't want to say adjustments, but necessary steps. I've taken necessary steps to ensure that equality is something that is not relegated. So that gives me hope. The last thing I would say is that despite the fact that Nigeria is deeply cultural, deeply religious, we have found a way to navigate those. And that's a good example is the Child Rights Act, which took 20 years. I mean, why should somebody resist protecting children? But it took 20 years. By the end of the day, we've had universal adoption. And this is made possible because advocacy to the people who actually are at the forefront, religious leaders, cultural leaders, if we can achieve change at that level, then it's possible to achieve change downstream. If we are able to convince imams, convince pastors, convince political leaders that this thing is necessary regardless of what you believe in, and find a way to marry both our culture, traditions into the same value, then it's possible that we can achieve gender equality. Maybe not in 2030, but it's going to happen eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. I agree. And thank you so much to all our speakers. Very, very aptly said. I totally agree. And I think all our speakers have echoed, even if it's not all the opinion of everyone on this call, they've echoed majority of our opinion. There is hope. And we can attribute that to globalization. We can attribute that to models of possibilities. We can see the before of African countries, and I'm not even talking about European countries, right? Eric mentioned Rwanda, she mentioned South Africa. To some extent, to a very large extent, they currently serve as model countries as far as gender equality, some facets of gender equality is concerned. So there is definitely hope. Please, if you're not speaking, can you kindly mute? Olufumilola, do you mind muting yourself? I'll just mute, help do that. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much to all our speakers. We have comments, and thank you for the comments in the chat. And we have a question, but I think Arepitan has responded to it. Imelda says, building on your collective expertise, I'd like to ask a question to all our speakers. Given the persistent gap between gender equality laws and lived realities in Nigeria, what do you see as the single most transformative action across policy, culture, and citizen engagements that could realistically accelerate meaningful change by 2030? What do you think is the single most transformative action across policy, culture, and citizen engagement? That is very huge. But Araktan says resourcing, training, and empowering of the Ministry of Women Affairs so that they can implement the national gender policy. Thank you, Arek Bitan. Any thoughts from Chidera or Mary Jane?
The question on the chat, boss.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I think we've all touched on this, but just to chime in, I think we just have to educate people. We have this perception that people know better, but not everyone knows better. I mean, opportunity and exposure has given us information that created change within us. Just like Aripiton said, internalizing the experiences makes you radicalized about this, but some people do not even have this opportunity as a result of where they belong to, the society they are in, what have been modeled to them. So I think it's about generally again, it's not going to start from up down. I strongly believe that when it comes to gender equality, the change has to be from ground up, because I've not seen where oppressors are eager to challenge status quo that is in favor of them. If we are saying there's no political will because the status quo is in favor of the people who are currently in power. So if we want to make change, it has to be from ground up. We have to be graceful in, educating women, correcting, and hoping that with more exposure, with more education, women would get more empowered, take more positions, and change is going to definitely diffuse. So yeah, that's my response.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dara. I'll take that as your closing thoughts.
Yep.
And yes, I totally agree. The change has to be from ground up. Closing words from Arepitan, please. Any closing words? Reflections, charge, call to action. Or Mary Jane, either of you can go. See, is the secretary here?
Okay, I think we have said it all, but just to conclude on this conversation, based on my own part, the grassroots advocacy, which I think is the most, because everything we're doing, speaking, we are all taking the conversation from the very top or the bottom to the top. So I think the grassroots advocacy that we're doing is actually the engine of the change. But an engine also needs fuel or needs something to make it move. So what is now the fuel? What can we do? I think the fuel is the policies. We can't shy away from these policies. They are still very, very important. So I think it requires fueling. As I said, the grassroots advocacy is the engine for the change we have been clamoring for years. But it requires fueling. And what is this fuel? It's the form of policies, police, women involvement in politics, involvement in private sector or public sector at work. Also, invest in financial resources, because as Aripiton said that it will require the answer she said, the question asked is that it will require resourcing, training, and empowering the Ministry of Women Affairs. So it's also boils down to investment, financial investment in the women sector or the women affairs sector. So also political will, financial resources from the government and international bodies. We know that the international bodies are also big on the gender equality. So these are the things I think we need to fully achieve or fully end this discussion on the SDG 5, which is gender equality. Thank you so very much. I'm sorry for my network.
Thank you so much, Mary Jane. Oh, that's fine. That's totally fine. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all our speakers. Thank you so much for driving this conversation with so much thought, with so much clarity, and also being practical, right? I've been in rooms where conversations were had, but these issues were discussed, but none actually touched on practicals. It was as though we were building our castles in air. But thank you so much for giving language to our hope and for giving language to what we should look forward to, and for us for giving language to our current realities and the actual problems that we should start paying attention to. Because what happens is that these issues, so I was reading something the other day randomly, and someone spoke about tolerance to tolerance to terrible news touching on gender equality. So we've seen so much, we've heard so much, some of us have experienced so much that we've developed some sort of tolerance to these things, and we see it and we hear it and we read and we just hiss and we do our and we do our this is terrible, and we've moved on. But thank you for helping us to stop, think, and deeply reflect on what is at stake and what every single person in this room and every single person listening can do to move the needle in favor of achieving gender equality in Nigeria. We have some reflections in the chat, very interesting. Someone mentioned how that some people think that there is no gender inequality, but the issue is that women are not just doing enough. And there's a belief that women have more opportunities or higher chances to thrive than men. They have a lot of thoughts, and I'd love to respond to that. But I think Eric Pitan has done that. So I'll just hand the reins over to Chike to close us out. Thank you so much, everyone, for engaging. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And thank you for making today's conversation worth our while. Chike, over to you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Precious, for so graciously hosting us for this entire hour plus. And yeah, to everyone who joined in, I really appreciate everyone who joined the call. It shows that personally we value the conversation around gender. I'd like to say just one more thing I think nobody really mentioned. I think it's very imminent. And it's the fact that the current Nigeria's national bodies for gender expires this year. And currently there are no plans for something new. So we can leave aside the talk around its performance. That's an issue, obviously. But putting that aside, the fact that it expires this year and there is no plan to talk about gender beyond this year should worry us, because the last time that happened was in 2015. So the first national policy for gender ran from 2006 to 2015, and there was no policy for gender from that year till 2021. So I think that's something we should keep in mind. But if you're into advocacy or you have a voice online, I think that'll be something you can really invest your time and attention to. So, but beyond that, thank you everyone. I appreciate everyone for joining the call. I will keep the conversation going. This entire meeting will be on our YouTube channel, maybe the next 2 or 3 days, so you can watch it again. You can share with your friends. Before we just wrap up, I'll just bring up our policy lead here at SimpleFix Nigeria, Oyindamola Adebayo, just to give us a few thoughts, and then we'll wrap everything up. Thank you all for joining. Oyinda, are you here? Hello, Oyinda.
Yes, I am. I want to speak.
Yeah, just a few thoughts for wrap up.
Hello, please. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go on.
All right. I've listened to what everybody has said. It has been very, very educative, and a whole lot of ideas, ideologies, and lived experiences of people have been shared. Well, as a policy researcher and policy analyst, I need us to understand that to achieve gender equality by 2030 is probably not feasible in some parts of the world, especially Nigeria. And on that note, I would like everyone to go back to keep pondering why I said it's probably not feasible, because in order to achieve gender equality, we must be able to understand all the approaches to gender. And Nigeria has not been able to encompass all those approaches to gender. Until we can slot in all the approaches to gender and form a kubuki, or what do you guys call this? This thing that you guys play, that engineering students play with. I think it's called the cubicle. Until you can slot each approaches into this cubicle together and everything fits in, we'll be able to achieve gender equality. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Yinda. And once again, thank you all for joining the call. We'll keep the conversation going, and yeah, have a lovely afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you're joining from the world. Thank you all. Bye.